Since the dawn of modern civilization, or 1986, whichever one came first, the Zelda series has been there, always providing memorable experiences and enjoyable slices of gameplay and storytelling. Depending on how long you've been playing Zelda games, you might have picked up one or two unforgettable moments, whether it be something incredible or something slightly less incredible. And this countdown is dedicated to these outstanding moments. The one thing I want you people to remember while watching this video is that the moments I've picked are very personal, very memorable to me and me alone. It's highly possible that my experience of the Legend of Zelda series has been different to yours, and that certain moments stood out more than others, and all I ask is that you respect my choices. There's literally an infinite number of moments in the Legend of Zelda series that could be considered memorable, so there's a lot of moments for me to pick. But with that out of the way, let's get this thing going. Remember your childhood? Back then you didn't care if a game wasn't perfect, all you cared about was if this little game in front of you was going to keep you entertained. And actually, that's the exact case with the Oracle games. I'm sure that we all know that they aren't anywhere near perfect, but for me, they certainly had one or two striking moments. You've just come off of Crescent Island, some island that you got stranded on after some kind of Link's Awakening storm, and you're on your way to the next dungeon and the next area. Hey man, you say you're building a bridge to Symmetry City and that your workers have disappeared? Oh no, that's a big shame! Oh wait, I forgot about that magic talking kangaroo I had somewhere. He's a nice guy. His name's Ricky. With the bridge built, you can finally make your way into Symmetry City, and towards the next dungeon. Except... damn. Symmetry City is a wreck, destroyed by a rampaging volcano that for some reason is located within the city itself. Like seriously, whose idea was that? That's a really bad idea, guys. There's no sign of life, you can't go into any of the ruined houses, and just listen to that tragic 8-bit music. The shock comes from the happy Zelda overworld theme and the bright colours to the ominous glow of a ruined city. And the contrast is really striking. When did this game become so serious? Let me take you all the way back to E3 2010 and the reveal of Skyward Sword. I'm sure we all remember losing it over the reveal of a new Legend of Zelda game, and a Zelda game with Wii Motion Plus no less. But I want to focus on one thing in particular. They showed off this, a boss we all know now is called Moldarach, and a boss that appears at the end of the Lanayru mining facility. However, the trailer shows him in a foresty biome, and playing the game for the first time, I naturally thought that this giant scorpion guy would appear as the boss of the Skyview Temple. It's kind of a foresty temple, foresty biome, scorpion boss, it makes too much sense. And well, I couldn't have been more wrong. I'm not too sure how much of this was deliberate, but Nintendo, this is absolutely genius. You show off one boss in your trailer, it stays in your mind, the player gets to where they think they will encounter this boss, and then you throw friggin' Girahim in their face. Of all the surprises you could have thrown up, showing off the most exciting and twisted Zelda villain in the franchise's history is a pretty good idea. But sure, okay, you have the revelation of an insane Zelda villain. What else you got? Well, Girahim took this chance with both hands and his tongue. Seeing and fighting Girahim for the first time is an unforgettable experience on its own, let alone when set up as a surprise for the player. Previous Zelda games have very rarely seen you fight the main villain in the first dungeon, and 2 more times later in the game, and this first instance is the introduction this game sorely needed. As a whole, I can say with some confidence that Ocarina of Time still remains, after 15 years, the most memorable Zelda game for the vast majority of Zelda fans. You can point to the fact that it's the first 3D Zelda game, or how so many iconic moments seem to come up with both young Link and adult Link, but I'm sure everybody remembers the final fight with Ganondorf. It's a moment that the whole game's been building up to, ever since that opening cutscene and Link's dream cutscene thing. Ganon has been an ever-present part of Ocarina of Time. You see him in Hyrule Castle as a child, you return the spiritual stones and gain the Master Sword, Ganon plunges Hyrule and the Sacred Realm into darkness, and as a topper, he kidnaps Zelda seconds after she revealed herself to be Sheik. Safe to say that this pigman needs to go to slaughter. The fight with Ganondorf and the Beast of a Second Form are both very well documented, but my memorable moment comes at the very end, the final blow delivered straight to his skull, spraying red or green blood all over the place. It's a finisher that's been used and modified throughout the series, but this is the ending that every player wanted, to absolutely bury your sword up to the hilt in Ganon's stupid face. So damn satisfying! But wait, it's anecdote time. During another one of my more recent playthroughs, I got to this fight with the Bigoron sword, and I'm sure you remember how Ganon knocks the Master Sword out of your hand at the very start of the fight. You then have to switch to either the Megaton Hammer or the Bigoron sword to do damage, until you can get the Master Sword back and use that instead. But hang on a sec, doesn't the Bigoron sword do more damage than the Master Sword? Yeah, it does. So when I got the Master Sword back, I just kept using the Bigoron sword to finish the fight faster. But in fact, the final battle was scripted in such a way that you have to use the Master Sword to defeat Ganon. So I was actually smacking away at Ganon's tail for about half an hour or so before I figured out what was going on. God damn it, Nintendo! Like I said, Ocarina of Time is that one Zelda game that sticks in the memory of the majority of gamers. The iconic status is through the roof and down the road, and its legacy is something that later Zelda games reference and respect. Having completed the Tower of the Gods in Wind Waker, you are granted access to the world under the waves, under all of this water that makes up the overworld. This new mysterious location is surrounded in secrecy. It looks unlike anything you've come across in the game before. For a start, everything is in black and white, with a bunch of enemies frozen in motion, and when you consider how colourful a game like Wind Waker is, it's a dramatic contrast. So you wander about a bit and you work out that this place is obviously Hyrule Castle. But the question still remains, why the fuck is a place like this under the sea? Well, through a fancy little Triforce block puzzle, you're given access to the basement area of the castle, and how fortunate someone left a fancy looking sword down here. Pulling said fancy ass sword releases the hold on Hyrule Castle, colouring the scenery and bringing the Darknuts and Moblins back to life. That's all when it clicks. You just picked up the Master Sword. This is Hyrule that was sunk by the flood that makes up the overworld, and you've got a couple dozen enemies who all need slicing and dicing. Aww, shit son. This moment is a collection of little moments. You're in a setting that provides a setting similar to previous Zelda games, while also picking up the famous Master Sword, which, let's face it, is one of the high points in every Zelda game. And you are given quite literally the best possible opportunity to test out your new piece of kit. There aren't too many occasions in the Zelda series where you're in the same room as so many powerful foes. And boy is it a ton of fun. Wind Waker in 2002 was seen as a step back by many Zelda fans after they were shown a super realistic tech demo of Link and Ganondorf slogging it out 2 years prior. So by the time we all got the realistic Zelda game we were shown, in the form of Twilight Princess, the game offered up such a fight. And I can certainly say that this fight was very memorable. The trouble with the final confrontation between Link and Ganondorf is that it's got a lot to live up to. After final battles with Majora and the very cuddly Ganon in the 2 previous Zelda games, we finally got a battle that could potentially live up to the iconic fight from Ocarina of Time. And while you can't really compare the two because the fight in Twilight Princess is at least twice as long, it's an inevitable comparison. And that's the thing, the fight is not perfect. The first form of Puppet Zelda is a different take on the regulation tennis match between the good guy and the bad guy, or the bad girl. And the Beast Ganon bit is a welcome shake-up on the million different similar forms in Zelda history. And hey, even the horseback part was pretty good, even if I am very bad at it. But there's a slight problem with the last one. The final form is the moment that people were waiting for, the single scenario that people were making little puddles over, eagerly waiting for something that will blow the side of their head off. And you know what? It's easy. It's so goddamn easy. You wanted a one-on-one sword fight to the death? Yeah, sure, but big old Ganondorf isn't going to put up much of a fight. So the last form of the final battle is a dud, but actually it's still the most memorable part of Twilight Princess for me. Memorable moments don't always have to be unforgettable for all the right reasons, and after the preview fans were given back in 2000, the expectations were simply gigantic. And while it doesn't pull it off 100%, it's not something that's going to be easily forgotten. I like to think that one of the main themes in Wind Waker is growth. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but the journey from Little Pajama Boy to Courageous Hero of the Winds and all the hardships in between is what makes this game one of my favourites. And the moment that sums this up the best, look no further than the Forsaken Fortress. The first time you enter the Forsaken Fortress, you are but a mere shrimp. You have to resort to Metal Gear tactics and using barrels to avoid the searchlights and arsehole moblins that won't fucking leave me alone! It's a bit of a struggle, but you wiggle your way up to where your sister is being held before you're picked up by a giant bird and tossed 1,000,000 miles into the sea. So, sucks to be you, right? Well, you'd think so, but you've got an adventure to do. You travel around a bit, beating up a big scorpion and a giant flower, and generally having a good time. But once you've gained access to the underwater version of Hyrule and picked up the Master Sword, you finally have enough experience and snazzy gear to go back to the Forsaken Fortress and wreck some shit up. And wreck shit you most certainly do. Maybe it's how you blow a hole in the side of the fortress, or pick up the Skull Hammer almost immediately. But the second time you rock up to the Forsaken Fortress, the situation and premise is entirely different. You are no longer the secret agent who hides in a barrel. You have the Master Sword and the biggest hammer of all time. You are the aggressor, and it's time to cave some faces in, best summed up by the fight with the Helm Rock King. Revenge has never been sweeter. On the list of the things wrong with Skyward Sword, trust me, it's not like it's a blank list. The one aspect that's at the top, underlined, put in bold and everything else, is the role of Fi in the game. Let's face it here, everyone knows just how frustrating Fi can be, constantly getting in the way and pointing out the blindingly obvious. Throughout Skyward Sword, she very rarely had any redeeming moments or qualities, and right up until the very end, she was one of my least favourite characters in the series. But then, we got the very end. Fi always was the spirit of the Goddess Sword, or the Master Sword, or whatever you want to call it. And as seems to be the theme in a couple of Zelda games, you have to actually put the Master Sword back in the pedestal. But previous versions of this scenario never had an actual parting about it. You are, after all, just saying goodbye to a hunk of evil slaying metal. Comes Skyward Sword, and suddenly it's saying goodbye to Fi as well. Don't get me wrong, as a gameplay element, Fi is absolute garbage. But story-wise, this moment could not have been set up any better. Fi is pretty much your emotionless servant throughout the game. She does her job and tells you more information that you want to know. Then suddenly at the end of the game, you have to part company with someone who, let's be honest here, you took for granted because she was so bad for gameplay. The end result is a very emotional parting scene with Fi, complete with the inevitably heart-wrenching music. You might not have appreciated her while she was here, but you certainly do now, and the moment is unforgettable because of this. Majora's Mask may only have had 4 dungeons, but a big part of the game's makeup was the 1.5 tons of side quests that you could do. Side quests were always present in some form in Zelda games, but Majora's Mask was the first game in the series to actively make them an integral part of the game's story. Each side quest seemed to show the impact the prospect of impending death by Giant Moon had on different characters. And while I did thinking about putting on here the Romani Ranch side quest and the ghostly alien invasion thing, the most memorable side quest for me is most likely the most memorable side quest for quite a lot of people, the Anju and Kafei quest. In the early stages of playing Majora's Mask, through sheer curiosity and wandering around doing random shit, I would stumble across little moments of this side quest. Things like getting the Kafei mask and witnessing a couple of cutscenes. When you do actually line everything up and play the side quest out as it's supposed to be done, the end result is extraordinary. The Anju and Kafei quest follows the plight of Anju, who is to be married to her lover Kafei in 3 days. Except for the fact that Kafei's gone missing, has had his ceremonial mask stolen by prancing dickhead over here, and has also coincidentally been turned into a child by the rampaging Skull Kid. In short, you help Kafei get the sun mask back, you persuade Anju that Kafei will return before the wedding, or the end of the world, or whichever one happens first, and you witness the unity between the two, so you get the couple's mask. And you use that mask once, for 1 heart piece. Thank you, Nintendo, you son of a bitch! So why is this thing so memorable? Oh, tons of things. A lot of this side quest is waiting around for specific times, and throughout this real life hour-long quest, you'll be spending a lot of time just hanging around waiting for things to happen. But of course, once things are put into motion, it develops into one of the most complex and emotionally charged moments in Zelda history. Maybe calling an hour-long side quest a moment is a bit of a stretch, but it's just a little part of Majora's Mask, and while it may be small, the impact it leaves lasts for a very long time. In the same way that the main theme of Wind Waker is the journey to the Hero of Winds, Ocarina of Time certainly feels like the journey to manhood. Starting off as a little kid who lives in a forest and working their way up to the legendary Hero of Time is a fairly impressive feat. And the moment that summed this up the best? The transition between young Link and adult Link, lifting the Master Sword for the very first time. I'm sure that at least some of you saw this coming. In the most iconic Zelda game, there are a handful of well-known and celebrated moments in this epic of a game. I don't know about you, but for me, the short cutscene where Link lifts the Master Sword is the best of the lot. It represents something that you've been working towards for the first half of the game, and it allows you to go through the second half of the game with a slightly different setup. Hey, you're a man now, you might as well enjoy it. I'm fairly confident that lifting the Master Sword in Ocarina of Time is perhaps the single most unforgettable moment in not only Ocarina of Time, but in the entire series. Considering that, as I'm sure you're very aware of by now, otherwise you're a little bit of an idiot, Ocarina of Time was the first 3D Zelda game, and therefore the first Zelda game to embrace these expansive cutscenes, a moment like this is naturally going to be one that lives long in the memory. But of course, with this at number 2, there is just one last moment in the Zelda series that, for me at least, was even more noteworthy. Another countdown, another video that ends with me talking about Majora's Mask. Seriously, for all the countdowns I've made, even the ones that aren't exclusively about Legend of Zelda, I seem to always finish by saying something along the lines of how creepy or emotional Majora's Mask is. So at this stage, I'm sure you know just how creepy and emotional Majora's Mask is, so there isn't a ton to say. All I can say is the moment I've picked, that one moment in the game that gets me every single time, leaves me thinking about it for a good while after. The suitably named final hours of Majora's Mask. Part of the reason why I love Majora's Mask is because how everything is so tense. The gameplay, you've only got 3 days to do everything, and the player themselves feels pretty tense. The 3-day time limit sits there at the bottom of the screen throughout the entire time you play the game, and it just ticks away. Sure, you've got the Song of Time stocked away just in case things get a little bit too close for comfort, but in reality, you're still dealing with a lot of highly strung scenarios. In the end, should you see the 3 days out until the last 6 hours, the picture in front of you becomes very different. All that tension, all that danger, all that sense of impending disaster suddenly comes to the forefront in the form of the moon suddenly becoming gigantic and just waiting out the last couple of hours. The music changes to my favourite song in the game, and with the bells in the background, you really do get a sense that the world is literally coming to an end around you. Video games have handled the idea of the apocalypse differently, but who would have thought that a Zelda game would be one of the best? From the swordsman cowering in the back room of his dojo, to the resolute head carpenter who believes the moon won't fall, the final hours of Majora's Mask are a remarkable moment within the Zelda series. This has been Rabbid Luigi, and if you see the moon get steadily bigger over the course of 3 days, don't stand there and shout at it.
Put on Side War off, make it loud, and the Romeo Foxtrot, shall we dance?